Some phone calls change everything. For Marcus Webb, billionaire CEO of Meridian Industries, that call came on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. He almost didn't answer. If he hadn't, a 7-year-old girl would still be suffering in silence. And Marcus would still be the successful, lonely man who had everything except what mattered most. But he did answer, and nothing would ever be the same. The spring rain hammered against the windows of the 20th floor as Marcus Webb stood in his corner office overlooking the restless streets of downtown Chicago. At 42, he had built Meridian Industries from nothing into a technological empire worth billions. His salt and pepper hair was always perfectly combed. His steel blue eyes reflected a man who had conquered every challenge life threw at him. Every challenge except one, the one that left a permanent hollow in his chest. He had never found someone to share his success with, never experienced the warmth of a family waiting for him at home. The penthouse apartment, with its floor-to-ceiling windows and imported marble, was beautiful. It was also empty. Every night he returned to that emptiness. Every morning he woke to silence. 20 years of building an empire. 20 years of coming home to no one. His assistant knocked softly before entering. Jennifer Walsh had been with him for 12 years. She knew him better than anyone. She could read his moods in the set of his shoulders, the tightness around his eyes. "Mr. Webb, the board meeting starts in 10 minutes. Marcus nodded without turning. His gaze was lost in the gray cityscape. The rain continued its relentless assault on the glass. Somewhere down there, people were living real lives. Families were gathering around dinner tables. Children were laughing. Parents were tucking their kids into bed. He had none of that. He had chosen this life, chosen the deals over dinner, chosen the meetings over connection, chosen to build walls so high that no one could climb them. It had made him rich. It had also made him alone. His phone vibrated on the mahogany desk. Unknown number. He usually ignored such calls. Telemarketers, scammers, wrong numbers. Nothing good ever came from unknown numbers. His hand moved to dismiss it, but something made him pause. Some instinct he couldn't name. Some feeling that whispered this was different. Marcus picked up the phone. "Hello?" His voice was firm, professional. The voice that commanded boardrooms and sealed billion-dollar deals. What came next shattered the cold silence of his executive world. "Daddy?" The voice was small, trembling, desperate. "Daddy, I've been cooking for 3 years. I'm so tired. My hands hurt. Please come get me." Marcus froze. His heart, so controlled and measured, stumbled. The rain seemed to fade. The office seemed to disappear. There was only that voice. That impossibly small, impossibly exhausted voice. "Who is this?" The words came out rougher than he intended. "How did you get this number?" "I found Mommy's phone," the little voice continued, breaking with emotion. "Mrs. Grayson says if I tell Mommy, she'll send my baby brothers away. But I can't do this anymore, Daddy. I'm only 7. I don't want to cook anymore." The words hit Marcus like physical blows. Cooking for 3 years. That would mean since she was 4. 4 years old. Impossible. This had to be some elaborate prank. Perhaps a social experiment. Perhaps a scam designed to tug at heartstrings and open wallets. Yet the raw pain in that child's voice carried an authenticity that froze his blood. "Sweetheart, I think you have the wrong number." He forced himself to speak gently. His businessman facade was cracking. "I'm not your father." He should hang up. Should dismiss this as the prank it must be. Should return to his board meeting where actual business awaited. Real problems. Problems he could solve with money and strategy. But he didn't hang up. "But tell me," he heard himself say, "where are you? Are you safe right now?" A muffled sound came through the line. Someone moving quickly. Something being hidden. The rustle of panic. "I have to go." The voice was urgent now. Frightened. "She's coming. Please, Daddy." 47 Maple Street, apartment 3B, please. The line went dead. Marcus stared at his phone. His mind was racing. Every rational part of him screamed the same message. Prank, hoax, manipulation, someone playing on emotions, someone trying to get money, someone running a sophisticated con. But that voice, that desperate, exhausted little voice, saying she had been cooking since she was 4. Marcus pulled up his computer. His fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced speed. 47 Maple Street. The address appeared on his screen. Riverside, a working-class neighborhood about 30 minutes away. Modest apartment buildings. Regular families struggling to make ends meet. He stared at the address. He thought about the board meeting waiting for him. The Thornton merger that would add another $500 million to the company's value. the investors who expected him to be there. The reputation built on never missing a meeting, never being unprepared, never letting anything interfere with business. Then he thought about that voice. I'm only 7. I don't want to cook anymore. Marcus grabbed his coat. Cancel the board meeting, he told Jennifer as he strode past her desk. She looked up, startled. In 12 years, he had never canceled a board meeting. Never. Sir, but the Thornton merger. Reschedule it. Something urgent came up. Is everything okay? Marcus paused at the door. Was everything okay? He had just received a call from a child claiming to be forced to cook. A child who wasn't his daughter, who thought he was someone else, who had the wrong number. He should ignore this. He should return to his office, make the call, and move on with his day. But 12 years ago, Marcus had been in foster care. He had been 10 years old. There had been another child in that home, 8 years old, small, quiet, always wearing long sleeves even in summer. Marcus had seen the bruises, had heard the crying at night, had known something was terribly wrong. He had said nothing. 3 months later, that child was gone, removed from the home, sent somewhere else. Marcus never knew where, never learned what happened. But he remembered those eyes, those terrified, pleading eyes that seemed to beg someone, anyone, to notice, to care, to help. Marcus had been too afraid to speak up, too worried about his own safety, too young to understand that silence could be its own form of cruelty. He was not that scared 10-year-old anymore. I'll be back when I can, he told Jennifer. Then he was gone. The drive to Riverside felt eternal. Marcus's knuckles were white on the steering wheel as he navigated through traffic. That small voice kept echoing in his mind. Daddy, I've been cooking for 3 years. 3 years, since she was 4. His business mind tried to make sense of it, tried to find the angle, the con, the explanation that didn't involve a child in genuine distress. But his instincts, the same instincts that had guided him through impossible business negotiations, screamed that something was terribly wrong. The rain had lightened to a drizzle. The city gave way to smaller streets, older buildings. The neighborhood was quiet, families going about their evening routines, cars in driveways, lights in windows. Normal, peaceful. Maybe he was overreacting. Maybe this was exactly what it seemed on the surface. A wrong number, a child's imagination, a mistake. Number 47 Maple Street was a modest 3-story brick building, weathered but maintained. The kind of place where working families lived, where rent was affordable but not cheap, where people worked hard just to keep their heads above water. Marcus sat in his car for a moment, observing, looking for anything unusual, anything that would confirm or deny his suspicions. The street was quiet, too quiet perhaps. He was about to leave, about to dismiss this entire episode as foolishness, about to return to his real life, where board meetings and mergers mattered more than random phone calls from children. Then he saw her. A little girl appeared at a 3rd-floor window, no more than 7 years old, blonde hair tied in a messy ponytail. Even from the distance, even through the rain-streaked windshield, Marcus could see how small she was, how thin her arms were, how her small frame seemed to carry a weight far too heavy for a child. She was looking down at the street, searching, her small face pressed against the glass. Their eyes met, just for a second, just long enough for Marcus to see the hope flare in her expression, the desperate, heartbreaking hope that someone had come, that someone had answered her call. Then she disappeared from view. Marcus was out of his car and climbing the stairs to the 3rd floor before he consciously decided to move. His heart pounded, his mind raced. What was he doing? Invading a stranger's privacy based on a phone call? What if he was wrong? What if this family called the police on him? But what if he was right? What if that little girl needed help and he walked away? He reached apartment 3B. Inside, he could hear voices, children crying, an adult woman's sharp tone cutting through the sound. Then silence, sudden and complete. The kind of silence that comes when someone realizes they're being watched. Marcus knocked. The door opened a crack. A security chain held it in place. A woman in her 50s peered out, graying hair, cold eyes, a practiced expression of annoyance. Yes? Can I help you? My name is Marcus Webb. I received a phone call from this address, a little girl who seemed to be in distress. The woman's expression hardened. Ice formed in those cold eyes. I don't know what you're talking about. You must have the wrong apartment. I don't think I do. Marcus let his voice take on the authoritative tone that made boardrooms fall silent, the tone that told people he was not someone to be dismissed. A 7-year-old girl called me claiming she's been forced to cook for 3 years. She gave me this exact address. That's ridiculous. The woman started to close the door. Now, if you'll excuse me, Mrs. Grayson, Marcus said the name the child had mentioned, watching the woman's face carefully. Her eyes widened, just for a fraction of a second. Just enough. Caught. I'm calling the police if you don't leave immediately. Please do. Marcus pulled out his phone. His voice was calm, controlled. The voice of a man who always had a plan. In fact, let me help you with that. I'm sure they'll be very interested in investigating a claim of child endangerment. The standoff lasted only seconds. It felt like hours. Then a new voice came from inside the apartment. Weak, exhausted, but determined. Mr. Webb, is that really you? Marcus's chest tightened. Through the crack in the door, he could see her now. The little girl from the window. She was even smaller up close. Her face was pale with exhaustion. Her eyes carried a weariness that no child should ever know. And her hands. God, her hands were wrapped in makeshift bandages, stained with what looked like old burns. Yes, sweetheart, I'm here. He kept his voice soft despite the rage building in his chest. Can you tell me your name? Sophie. The word was barely a whisper. Sophie Torres, are you really going to help us? Before Marcus could respond, three identical small faces appeared behind Sophie. Triplet boys, around 4 years old, same blonde hair, same blue eyes. They clung to their sister's legs. Their faces were streaked with recent tears. Their clothes were rumpled and stained. These are my brothers. Sophie's voice carried a tired but protective tone. Ethan, Mason, and Dylan. I take care of them. Marcus felt something break inside him. The scene before him was everything wrong with the world condensed into one moment. A 7-year-old child, barely bigger than a doll herself, serving as a parent to 3 preschoolers. Her hands damaged from cooking. Her childhood stolen. Her brothers depending on her for survival. It was unbearable. It was unacceptable. It had to end. Mrs. Grayson, Marcus's voice was ice cold now, all pretense of civility gone. You have 2 options. You can open this door and let me speak with these children properly. Or I can make one phone call that will bring every authority in this city down on this apartment. He paused, let the threat sink in. Your choice. You have 10 seconds. The woman's face cycled through emotions. Anger at being challenged, fear of consequences, calculation about her options. She was trapped and she knew it. A stranger at her door making accusations, children visible behind her. The situation already suspicious. She had no good choices left. With shaking hands, she undid the chain. The apartment that Marcus stepped into would haunt him for years. It was small, cramped, but that wasn't the issue. Plenty of good families lived in small spaces, made them work, filled them with love despite the lack of square footage. This was different. This was wrong in ways that had nothing to do with size. The kitchen told the story. A step stool sat permanently in front of the stove, as if it belonged there, as if it was a normal part of the landscape. The counter was cluttered with cooking utensils, adult-sized, meant for adult hands, but clearly used by much smaller ones. Burn marks on the counter, scorch marks on the wall behind the stove. The living room should have been full of toys, should have been chaotic with the debris of childhood, building blocks, stuffed animals, picture books, the normal detritus of a house with 4 young children. Instead, there were blankets and pillows arranged like makeshift beds, pushed against the walls, taking up space where play should happen. The air was thick with the smell of overcooked food. Underlying that was something else, something harder to name. Desperation, fear. The scent of a home where joy had been rationed out in tiny portions until nothing remained. But worst of all were the children themselves. The triplets should have been running, playing, full of the boundless energy that came with being 4 years old. Instead, they sat quietly on the floor, too still, too silent, too well trained in the art of being invisible. Their eyes were watchful, wary. The eyes of children who had learned that noise brought consequences. And Sophie. Sophie stood in the center of it all, a tiny general watching over her troops. Her posture was protective, alert, ready to step between her brothers and any threat. She was 7 years old and she carried the weight of the world on shoulders that should have been concerned only with schoolwork and playtime. Marcus felt rage building in his chest. Pure, white-hot, righteous. Where is their mother? He forced the words out through clenched teeth. Mrs. Grayson shifted into defensive mode. She works, 2 jobs. She's doing her best. She pays me to watch them. Watch them? Marcus's voice rose despite his efforts to stay calm. Is that what you call this? A 7-year-old child cooking for 3 preschoolers? He pointed at Sophie's bandaged hands. Look at her hands. Look at what you've done. She volunteered. Mrs. Grayson's voice was defiant now, trying to regain control of the narrative. She wanted to help. I'm teaching her responsibility, teaching her life skills. I'm 7 years old. Sophie's voice rang out, loud, clear, cutting through the excuses like a knife. I didn't volunteer. Her small body was shaking. 3 years of silence breaking all at once. 3 years of fear and exhaustion and pain demanding to be heard. You said if I didn't cook, you'd tell Mommy that I was bad, that she'd have to send Ethan and Mason and Dylan away. You said it was my fault they cried so much. You said I had to fix it. The dam broke. 3 years of held-back tears came flooding out. Sophie collapsed. Her small body shook with sobs. All the strength that had held her together, all the courage that had allowed her to make that phone call, all of it dissolved in the face of finally being able to tell the truth. Immediately, her 3 little brothers moved. With an instinct that broke Marcus's heart into 1,000 pieces, they rushed to their sister, wrapped their tiny arms around her, patted her head with clumsy comfort. They couldn't have been more than 4 years old, but they knew their role. They knew who took care of them. They knew who needed them now. Sophie, no cry, one of them said. His voice was small but determined. We love Sophie. Marcus knelt down, bringing himself to the children's level, making himself smaller, less threatening. He had negotiated with kings and presidents, had stared down corporate raiders and hostile takeovers. None of that had prepared him for this, for the raw vulnerability of 4 children who had suffered in silence. Sophie, sweetheart, listen to me. His voice was gentle now, all the anger channeled somewhere else, put aside so he could be what these children needed. None of this is your fault. Do you understand? None of it. Sophie looked up at him. Her eyes were red from crying. Her face was streaked with tears. But there was something else there too, something that looked almost like hope. But Mrs. Grayson said, Mrs. Grayson is wrong. Marcus cut her off firmly. And what she did is illegal. Very, very illegal. He stood, turned to face the woman who had done this. Let all the fury he felt show in his eyes. Sit down. Don't move. Don't speak. If you try to leave, I will have security here in 2 minutes. Mrs. Grayson sat. She was trapped, and she knew it. Marcus turned back to Sophie, softened his voice again. When does your mommy come home? Late. Sophie's voice was small again. Tired. After we're supposed to be sleeping. She works at the diner until 9. Then she cleans offices until midnight. Marcus's jaw clenched. A mother working herself to exhaustion. Doing everything she could to provide for her children. Paying someone to protect them. Trusting someone to keep them safe. And that trust had been betrayed in the worst possible way. And you've been cooking for your brother since you were 4? Sophie nodded. Fresh tears started to fall. At first it was just heating up soup, but then Mrs. Grayson said I needed to make real meals. She showed me once. Then she said I had to do it myself. She held up her bandaged hands. I burned myself a lot at first. It still happens sometimes. What do you cook for them? Pasta mostly, sometimes rice and beans. I can make scrambled eggs now without burning them too much. And sandwiches. But Mrs. Grayson says sandwiches aren't a real dinner. Marcus felt tears threatening, for the first time in years. This impossibly small child describing her routine as if it were normal. As if cooking at 4 years old were just something children did. As if burned hands were an acceptable price to pay for feeding her brothers. Sophie, he had to pause, had to gather himself. You are the bravest, strongest little girl I've ever met, but no child should have to be this brave. Do you understand? Are you going to call the police? Mrs. Grayson interjected. Her voice had shifted now, no longer defiant, pleading, please, I need this job. I didn't hurt them. They're fine. Marcus stood. His full height and presence filled the small apartment. Fine? The word was quiet, dangerous. You call this fine? He pulled out his phone. I'm calling the police and Child Protective Services, and then I'm calling my lawyer. And then we're going to wait right here for Sophie's mother to come home, because she deserves to know what's been happening to her children while she's been breaking her back to provide for them. His fingers moved across the screen, making the calls, setting things in motion that couldn't be stopped. Sophie's small voice spoke up one more time. Mr. Webb, thank you for coming. I didn't think anyone would come. Marcus looked at her, this impossibly small child with impossibly huge eyes. This 7-year-old who had suffered for 3 years in silence. This little girl who had been brave enough to call a stranger and ask for help. He made a promise. Silent but binding, whatever it took, whatever resources he had to use, whatever influence he had to leverage. He would make sure this family was protected. He would make sure Sophie got her childhood back. He would make sure justice was served. He didn't know it yet, couldn't see the future, couldn't predict how this moment would transform his life. But somewhere deep inside, something fundamental had shifted. The hollow in his chest had begun to fill, and Marcus Webb would never be the same again. The triplets had fallen asleep on the floor, curled around each other like puppies seeking warmth and comfort. Their small bodies rose and fell with the steady rhythm of exhausted children. Even in sleep, they stayed close, protective of each other. A unit that had learned survival meant staying together. Sophie sat guard beside them, despite everything, despite the tears that had just stopped flowing, despite the bandaged hands and the exhaustion that made her small shoulders sag. She was still watching over her brothers, still playing the role she had been forced into 3 years ago, still being the parent when she should have been the child. Marcus watched her from across the room. His phone was already out, already dialing. The first call went to 911, emergency services. A calm, professional voice answered. 911, what's your emergency? I'm at 47 Maple Street, apartment 3B. I need police and child protective services out immediately. There are 4 children here who have been suffering abuse and neglect. The operator's voice sharpened, became more focused. Sir, are the children in immediate danger? Marcus looked at Sophie, at her bandaged hands, at the triplets sleeping on a floor that should have had beds, at Mrs. Grayson sitting in her chair, silent now, knowing her world was about to collapse. They've been in danger for 3 years, but they're safe now. I'm here, and I'm not leaving until help arrives. He gave the details, address, situation, what he had found. The operator assured him units were being dispatched. Police and social services. They would arrive within minutes. Minutes felt like hours. Mrs. Grayson sat frozen. Her earlier defiance had evaporated. Reality was setting in. The consequences of 3 years of exploitation were about to land on her with the full weight of the law. Sophie looked up at Marcus. Her eyes were still red from crying, but there was something else there now, something that looked like relief. Like the enormous burden she had carried was finally being lifted from her impossibly small shoulders. Are they really coming? Her voice was barely a whisper. They're really coming, sweetheart, and you're going to be okay. All of you. What about Mommy? Will she be in trouble? Marcus felt his heart clench. Even now, even after everything. Sophie's first concern was protecting her mother. Your mommy is not in trouble. She didn't know what was happening. When she gets home, we're going to tell her everything, and she's going to make sure you're all safe. She worked so hard. Sophie's voice was small, guilty, as if working hard was somehow Sophie's fault. She's always tired. I didn't want to make her more tired. Sophie, listen to me. Marcus knelt down again, made sure she could see his eyes, see the truth in them. What happened to you is not your fault, not your mother's fault. The only person responsible is the one who hurt you. He didn't look at Mrs. Grayson, didn't give her the satisfaction of acknowledgement. All his attention was on Sophie. You called for help. That took incredible courage. You saved yourself and your brothers. Do you understand that? You're a hero. Sophie's lips trembled. I was so scared. Being scared and doing it anyway, that's what bravery is. The sound of sirens cut through the quiet neighborhood, growing louder, getting closer. Help was arriving. The police came first. 2 officers climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor. Officer Martinez was a woman in her 30s with kind eyes and a calm demeanor that came from years of handling difficult situations. Her partner, Officer Brennan, was older, more weathered, the kind of cop who had seen too much but still showed up every day to try to make a difference. Martinez immediately went to the children, kneeling beside the sleeping triplets, checking them with gentle hands, making sure they were breathing normally, that they weren't injured beyond what was visible. Brennan took Mrs. Grayson into the hallway. His voice was low but firm, reading her rights, taking her statement, building the case that would ensure she faced justice. Within minutes, another arrival. Dr. Rachel Morgan, social worker, late 40s, carrying the weight of 1,000 heartbreaking cases in her eyes, but still showing up, still fighting for children who had no one else to fight for them. And she came prepared, arms full of emergency supplies, blankets, first aid kits, bottles of water, granola bars, the basics that children in crisis needed. But her focus went immediately to Sophie's hands. "Sweetheart, my name is Rachel. I'm here to help. Can I look at your hands?" Sophie glanced at Marcus. He nodded encouragingly. "It's okay. Dr. Morgan is going to make sure you get the care you need." Rachel sat down beside Sophie, began unwrapping the makeshift bandages with practiced gentleness. Each layer revealed more damage, more evidence of prolonged suffering. Marcus watched Rachel's expression, saw it shift from professional concern to barely contained anger. This was bad, worse than he had imagined. And he had imagined it was pretty terrible. The burns underneath ranged from old scars to recent blisters. Some had been treated with basic first aid, antibiotic ointment, clean gauze. Someone had tried to care for them, Sophie herself probably. Or maybe Elena when she noticed, and Sophie made up some excuse. Others had clearly been ignored, left to heal on their own or get infected. The kind of neglect that spoke to a systematic pattern of abuse. Sophie sat stoically through the examination, only flinching when Rachel touched a particularly tender spot. A fresh burn, maybe from yesterday, maybe from this morning. "Sophie, sweetheart, these burns need proper medical attention. When was the last time you saw a doctor?" Sophie's eyes darted to the hallway, where Mrs. Grayson stood with Officer Brennan, where the woman who had controlled her life for 3 years was being questioned. "I don't remember." The words came out small, ashamed, as if not seeing a doctor was Sophie's failure. Mrs. Grayson said doctors were too expensive, that Mommy couldn't afford to miss work. Rachel's jaw tightened, but her voice stayed gentle. "Mrs. Grayson doesn't make those decisions. Your mother does. And I promise you she would want you to see a doctor. We're going to make sure that happens." She looked up at Marcus, professional assessment in her eyes, trying to figure out who this man was, what his connection to this family might be, whether he was part of the problem or part of the solution. "Mr. Webb, I need to understand your connection to this family. Officer Martinez says you're not a relative." Marcus straightened, met her gaze directly. "No, Sophie called my number by mistake. She was looking for her father. She was asking for help. I couldn't just ignore it." Rachel studied him for a long moment, taking his measure. She had seen a lot of people in her career, could usually spot the predators, the manipulators, the ones who pretended to help but had darker motives. Whatever she saw in Marcus's face must have satisfied her. That was very fortunate for these children. Many people would have dismissed such a call. Marcus felt shame wash over him. "I almost did. I almost hung up and went back to my meeting." "But you didn't." Rachel's voice carried approval. "You listened and you acted. Sometimes that's all it takes to change everything." The sound of footsteps on the stairs, rapid, urgent, someone running. A woman burst through the door. Elena Torres was 32 years old and looked every day of it. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a practical bun. Her diner uniform still smelled of grease and coffee. Her face was flushed from running, from panic, from the fear that comes when someone calls you at work and says the police are at your home with your children. She was beautiful in the way that strong women are beautiful. Not polished, not perfect, but real, genuine. The kind of beauty that comes from fighting every day to survive. From choosing to keep going when giving up would be easier. Her eyes scanned the room, taking in the scene with a mother's instinct. Police, social worker, her children, and a stranger in an expensive suit who looked completely out of place in her modest apartment. "Someone called me at work." Her voice was breathless, frightened. "Said police were here with my children." "What's happened? Where's—" Her gaze landed on Sophie, then on the medical supplies spread around her daughter, then on the bandages being unwrapped from small hands. "Oh my God, Sophie, baby, what's wrong? Mommy!" The word was a cry, a release, a breaking of the dam that had held back 3 years of suffering. Sophie ran to her mother, buried her face in that grease-stained uniform, grabbed handfuls of polyester fabric like it was a lifeline, like it was the only thing keeping her tethered to earth. "Mommy, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to tell, but I couldn't do it anymore. My hands hurt so much." Elena held her daughter. Her body was shaking. Her mind was trying to process what was happening, trying to understand why there were police in her apartment, why a social worker was examining her child, why Sophie was apologizing for something Elena didn't understand. "Tell what, Sophie? What are you talking about? What are—" The words died as Elena really looked at her daughter's hands. Officer Martinez stepped forward, professional, gentle, but firm. Mrs. Torres, I'm Officer Martinez. We need to ask you some questions about your childcare arrangements. But first, when was the last time you saw your daughter's hands? Elena looked down. Really looked. Sophie had been wearing long sleeves lately. Said she was cold. Elena had been too tired, too rushed, too focused on just getting through each day to question it. Now she took her daughter's small hands in her own. The bandages were mostly removed. The damage was visible. Burns, multiple burns, different ages, different stages of healing. Elena's face went white, then red, then white again. What? How? The words were barely a whisper. Dr. Rachel Morgan spoke. Her voice was gentle, but the words were devastating. Mrs. Torres, your daughter has burns consistent with prolonged exposure to cooking surfaces. Multiple burns of varying ages. She states she's been cooking meals for her brothers for approximately 3 years. Were you aware of this arrangement? The room seemed to tilt. 3 years. Sophie had been cooking for 3 years, since she was 4 years old. Cooking? Elena's voice rose, disbelief turning to horror. She's 7 years old. Of course I wasn't aware. I would never. She couldn't finish the sentence. Couldn't find words big enough to express the horror, the guilt, the rage that was building in her chest. She spun toward the hallway, toward where Mrs. Grayson stood with Officer Brennan. Linda, the name was ice. What did you do to my baby? Mrs. Grayson opened her mouth, started to formulate some excuse, some explanation that would make this seem less terrible than it was. Elena didn't let her speak. Explain? The fury was volcanic now, erupting. You were supposed to watch them. I paid you every week, gave you extra for food, trusted you with the most precious things in my life. And you made my 7-year-old daughter cook. She started moving toward Mrs. Grayson, every instinct screaming to hurt this woman who had hurt her child, to make her suffer the way Sophie had suffered. Officer Brennan stepped between them, firm but understanding. Mrs. Torres, I understand your anger, but you need to step back. Let us handle this. Handle this? She tortured my daughter, and she'll face consequences, but not like this. Not with you catching a charge, too. In the chaos, Marcus moved, not toward the adults fighting, toward the children. The triplets had woken up, confused by the noise, frightened by the anger in their mother's voice. They didn't understand what was happening, only knew that the adults were upset and that usually meant trouble. Marcus knelt beside them, made his voice gentle, calm, an anchor in the storm. It's okay, guys, your mommy's here now. Everything's going to be all right. 3 pairs of blue eyes stared at him, identical faces showing identical expressions of uncertainty. Who was this stranger? Why was he here? Could they trust him? One of them, Ethan maybe, reached out, touched Marcus's tie, the expensive silk, the pattern of subtle stripes. Pretty. The word was so simple, so innocent, so completely disconnected from the chaos around them. Marcus felt his throat tighten. Thank you, buddy. He managed a smile. You know what? You're pretty brave. All 3 of you. Another triplet spoke up. Mason, based on the slight difference in the way his hair fell. We have Sophie. The third, Dylan, nodded seriously. Sophie takes care of us. Marcus looked at the 3 little boys, at their absolute faith in their sister, at the way they instinctively knew she was their protector, their provider, their parent in all the ways that mattered. She does, doesn't she? But you know what? Sophie is still a little girl, just like your little boys. And little kids shouldn't have to take care of other little kids all by themselves. That's what grown-ups are supposed to do. Ethan considered this. Like mommy? Exactly like mommy. Officer Martinez had managed to calm Elena down, convince her to step away from Mrs. Grayson, to let the system work, to trust that justice would be served. But Elena's anger was still there, radiating from her like heat. She scooped up the triplets, held them close. Tears were streaming down her face. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. She kept repeating it, like a prayer, like if she said it enough times it would somehow undo the last 3 years, would somehow erase her daughter's suffering. Dr. Rachel Morgan approached her, gentle but firm. We believe you, Mrs. Torres, but we need to document everything that happened. Officer Brennan is taking Mrs. Grayson's statement separately. I need to talk with you and your children. She paused. Let that sink in, preferably somewhere more comfortable than this apartment. We'll need to inspect it as part of our investigation. You can't stay here tonight anyway. Elena looked around, at the apartment she had worked so hard to afford, at the place she had thought was keeping her children safe. It had become a crime scene, evidence of her failure, proof that while she was working herself to exhaustion, her daughter was suffering. Where are we supposed to go? I can't afford a hotel. I barely make rent as it is. Marcus cleared his throat. All eyes turned to him. If I may make a suggestion. His voice was calm, professional. I have a suite at the Riverside Hotel that I keep for business associates visiting from out of town. It's empty right now. Mrs. Torres and her children could stay there tonight. Give everyone some space to process this. Elena looked at him, really looked at him for the first time, taking in the expensive suit, the confident bearing. The way he stood, like someone used to being in control, her eyes narrowed. Mother's suspicion, protective instinct, wondering what this stranger wanted. And you are? Marcus Webb, the person Sophie called today. She thought I was her father. Elena's expression shifted, softened, then crumbled. She let out a bitter laugh, the kind that has no humor in it, only pain. Her father left before the triplets were born, said 4 kids was too much responsibility. She paused. Let the irony sink in. Too much responsibility for a grown man, but apparently perfect for a 4-year-old girl to handle. The words hung in the air. Indictment of the man who had abandoned them. Indictment of the system that had failed them. Indictment of Elena herself for not seeing what was happening. Rachel interjected. Mrs. Torres, Mr. Webb's offer is generous. And honestly, it would be better than staying here tonight. The alternative is a temporary shelter facility. Elena looked at her children, at Sophie with her damaged hands, at the triplets clinging to her, all of them exhausted, confused, frightened. She had spent 4 years fighting to protect them, to provide for them, to give them a home and safety and love. And in one night, she had discovered she had failed at the most basic level. She had left them with someone who hurt them, who exploited them, who stole her daughter's childhood. The fight went out of her. Okay, the word was quiet. Defeated. Thank you, Mr. Webb, that's very kind. Please, call me Marcus. The next hour was a blur of activity. Statements were taken, details recorded, evidence collected. Mrs. Grayson was led away in handcuffs. The charge was child endangerment. More charges would likely follow. The investigation was just beginning. Elena was given a preliminary list of medical appointments for Sophie, specialists who could treat the burns, therapists who could help with the trauma, a whole team of professionals who would now be part of their lives. Marcus arranged for his driver to pick up his car from Maple Street. He would drive the Torres family to the hotel himself, in Elena's aging minivan that sputtered and wheezed with every mile. The rain had stopped. The streets were slick and shining under the streetlights. The city was settling into its evening rhythm. People heading home from work, families gathering for dinner. Normal life continuing while one family's world had been turned upside down. Marcus drove carefully. Elena sat in the passenger seat, silent. Her hands were clenched in her lap. Her mind was clearly racing, processing, trying to make sense of the senseless. In the back, Sophie sat between 2 of her brothers. The third was strapped into a car seat on her other side. Despite everything that had happened, despite the revelation, despite the police and the social worker and the stranger now driving them to a hotel, Sophie was still taking care of her brothers. She was playing a simple hand game with them, her bandaged hands moving carefully, making them smile, making them laugh, giving them something normal in a night that had been anything but, still protecting them, still being the parent. Elena spoke suddenly. Her voice was thick with emotion. I keep meaning to get it fixed. She was talking about the van, the way it rattled and coughed. But between rent and groceries and paying Linda, her voice broke. God, I was paying her to hurt my daughter. Marcus kept his eyes on the road, kept his voice gentle. You were paying her to protect your children. She's the one who betrayed that trust. This isn't your fault, Elena. Isn't it? The words were sharp, accusing, directed at herself. I was so focused on keeping us fed and housed that I didn't see what was happening right in front of me. What kind of mother does that make me? Marcus glanced in the rearview mirror, at Sophie playing with her brothers, at the way she made them smile even through her own pain. It makes you a mother doing her best in an impossible situation. You're working 2 jobs to support 4 kids alone. That's not failure, Elena. That's heroism. Elena turned to look at him. Really look at him, trying to understand this stranger who had answered a random phone call and turned their lives upside down. Why are you doing this? Helping us? You don't know us. Marcus was quiet for a moment, trying to find the right words. Honestly, because when Sophie called me today, something inside me woke up. I've spent 20 years building a company, making money, achieving success, but I've never felt as purposeful as I did racing to that apartment to make sure one little girl was safe. He paused, let himself be vulnerable in a way he rarely allowed. Maybe I needed this as much as she needed someone to answer that call. Elena was quiet for a moment, then, the newspaper did a profile on you last year. Chicago's most eligible bachelor CEO, something like that. They mentioned you donate a lot to children's charities. I do, Marcus acknowledged. It's easy to write checks. What happened today wasn't easy, but it was real, and it mattered in a way that board meetings and profit margins never will. The Riverside Hotel appeared ahead. Elegant, but not ostentatious. The kind of place where wealthy families could stay comfortably without feeling overwhelmed by luxury. Marcus pulled into the parking garage, cut the engine. The sudden silence was heavy with unspoken things. Mr. Webb, Elena's voice was quiet. Marcus, I don't know how to thank you. You don't have to thank me. I'm just glad Sophie was brave enough to call and that I was smart enough to answer. The hotel suite was exactly as Marcus had described. Two connected rooms with a shared living area, more space than Elena's entire apartment, more luxury than her children had ever experienced. The hotel staff had prepared everything perfectly. The refrigerator was stocked with child-friendly foods, fruits, cheese, juice boxes, simple things that kids would actually eat. Toys and books were arranged in the living room. Not expensive or fancy, just normal things that normal children played with. Fresh clothes in various children's sizes were laid out on the beds. Someone had guessed at measurements, done their best to provide options, and there was a first aid kit, professional grade, with advanced burn treatment supplies. Robert, the hotel manager, greeted them personally, distinguished looking, late 50s, the kind of man who had spent a lifetime in hospitality and took pride in making people comfortable. Mr. Webb, everything is ready as you requested. Please don't hesitate to call if you need anything. Anything at all. Elena stood in the middle of the suite, looking around like she had stepped into another world. Her children fanned out, exploring carefully, touching things gently like they might break, like this luxury might disappear if they weren't careful. I can't afford this. Elena's voice was flat, practical. I appreciate the gesture, but I can't accept charity I can't repay. Marcus had expected this, had prepared for it. It's not charity. Consider it an investment in four incredible kids who deserve a chance to be kids. Starting tonight, Sophie appeared at her mother's side. Her voice was hopeful, tentative. Mommy, can we take a bath? The tub here is so big. Elena's eyes filled with tears. When was the last time her children had had a proper bath? When was the last time they had done something just because it was fun? When was the last time they got to be children? Yes, baby, you can all take a bath. A long, warm bath. She turned to Marcus. Her pride was fighting with her exhaustion, with her need, with the reality that her children deserved this even if she couldn't pay for it. I don't know how to thank you. You don't have to thank me. Just focus on your children tonight. Everything else can wait until tomorrow. Marcus moved toward the door, giving them space, giving them privacy. This family needed time together without a stranger watching. He paused at the threshold. Elena, what Sophie did today, calling for help, that took extraordinary courage. She learned that courage from somewhere, from someone. Elena met his eyes, questioning. She learned it from watching you fight for your family every single day. Then he was gone. Elena drew a bath for her children. The tub was enormous, luxurious, the kind of bath that existed in magazines and movies, but not in real life, not in her life. She filled it with warm water, added bubble bath from the complimentary bottles, watched it foam and rise. The triplets were excited, splashing, playing, laughing in a way they rarely got to laugh, the stress of the evening forgotten in the simple joy of warm water and bubbles. Sophie joined them, despite her bandaged hands, despite the pain, despite everything. She was in the middle of it all, making her brothers laugh with silly voices, with water games, with the kind of play that should have been her constant companion for the last 7 years. Elena watched through tears, her daughter, her brave, beautiful daughter, who had suffered in silence to protect her brothers, who had called a stranger because she was too afraid to tell her own mother, who had carried a burden that would have broken most adults. Later, after the bath, after the children were in pajamas that actually fit, after the triplets were tucked into beds that were soft and clean and safe, Elena found Sophie standing by the window. The city lights sparkled below. Chicago at night, beautiful and distant and full of lives being lived. Elena joined her daughter, pulled her close. Sophie, baby, I need you to know something. What happened with Mrs. Grayson? None of that was your responsibility. None of it was your fault. Sophie's voice was small. But I should have told you sooner. I was just so scared. Well, scared of what, baby? She said if I told, you'd lose your jobs, that we'd end up on the street, that Ethan and Mason and Dylan would be taken away. Sophie's voice was breaking. I couldn't let that happen, Mommy. I couldn't let them take my brothers. Elena held her daughter tighter, marveling at the strength in such a small body, at the love that had kept her silent, at the sacrifice that no child should ever have to make. You protected your brothers. You were so brave. But sweetheart, you're 7 years old. You should be protected, not doing the protecting. Sophie tried to smile. I'm almost 8. My birthday's next month. I know, baby, and we're going to celebrate it properly this year. I promise. They stood together, mother and daughter, looking out at the city. Sophie's voice was quiet when she spoke again. Mommy, is Mr. Webb going to be our new daddy? Elena was caught completely off guard. What? No, sweetie. Mr. Webb is just a kind man who helped us today. Sophie sounded disappointed. Oh, I think he'd be a good daddy. He was really nice to Ethan and Mason and Dylan, and he came when I called. She paused. Real daddies are supposed to do that, right? Elena felt her heart crack a little more. Yes, honey, real daddies are supposed to do that. She tucked Sophie into bed, watched her daughter's eyes close, saw the tension finally leave those small shoulders. For the first time in 3 years, Sophie could sleep without worrying about what tomorrow would bring, without planning meals in her head, without fear. Elena returned to the living room, sat on the impossibly comfortable couch, let herself feel everything she had been holding back. The horror of discovering what her daughter had endured, the rage at Mrs. Grayson's exploitation, the overwhelming guilt at not seeing what was happening, and underneath it all, something else, something confusing and unexpected. An awareness of Marcus Webb, his kindness, his immediate action, the way he had handled her children with such natural gentleness, the way he had looked at Sophie not with pity, but with respect, the way he had spoken to Elena not as a charity case but as an equal. She shook her head, dismissed the thoughts as ridiculous. He was a billionaire CEO who had helped them in a crisis. Tomorrow they would return to reality, to the hard work of finding new childcare, of dealing with legal proceedings, of figuring out how to afford proper medical treatment for Sophie's hands. Men like Marcus Webb didn't stay in the lives of working-class mothers with 4 kids. But as she drifted off to sleep on the impossibly comfortable hotel bed, Elena couldn't help remembering the way he had knelt beside her children, the way he had spoken to them with such genuine care, the way he had looked at her when he said Sophie had learned courage from watching her mother fight. Despite everything, despite the trauma of the day, despite the uncertainty of tomorrow, Elena felt something she hadn't felt in years, hope. And in his penthouse across the city, Marcus Webb stood at his window, looking out at the lights, thinking about 4 children who had changed his life in a single afternoon. The hollow in his chest was filling. And for the first time in 20 years, he didn't feel quite so alone. Marcus Webb could not sleep. At 2 in the morning, he sat in his penthouse apartment overlooking Lake Michigan. The city sprawled below him, millions of lights creating a tapestry of human life. Somewhere down there, people were living, loving, building families, creating memories. For 20 years, he had looked down at those lights and felt nothing but distance. Tonight was different. Tonight, he could not stop thinking about them, about Sophie's small voice on the phone, about her bandaged hands, about the way the triplets had instinctively rushed to comfort their sister when she broke down crying, about Elena's fierce protective love mixed with heartbreaking guilt. A glass of whiskey sat untouched on the table beside him. He had poured it an hour ago, thought it might help him sleep, but he didn't want to dull this feeling, didn't want to escape from it. For the first time in longer than he could remember, Marcus felt something other than emptiness. He felt purpose. His phone sat on the arm of the chair. He picked it up, scrolled through his contacts, found the number for the Riverside Hotel. His finger hovered over the call button. It was 2 in the morning. They were sleeping, safe, protected. They didn't need him checking on them like some worried parent. Except he was worried that Sophie might have nightmares, that the triplets might wake up confused in a strange place, that Elena might be lying awake consumed by guilt that wasn't hers to carry. He set the phone down without calling, but he couldn't stop thinking about them. His email notification chimed, a message from Dr. Rachel Morgan. The social worker had sent him a preliminary report, professional courtesy given his involvement in the case. Marcus opened it, read through the details with growing anger. Mrs. Grayson had initially denied everything, claimed Sophie was lying, that children made up stories for attention, that Marcus had coached her. The usual deflections of someone caught doing something indefensible. But interviews with neighbors told a different story. Mrs. Helen Davis from apartment 3A had heard a child crying in the kitchen, had heard smoke alarms going off repeatedly, had heard Mrs. Grayson yelling at Sophie to stop being dramatic when she burned herself. Mr. David Parker from apartment 2C had once offered to help when he smelled something burning and heard distress. Mrs. Grayson had turned him away, claimed everything was fine, told him to mind his own business. Both neighbors had considered calling Child Protective Services multiple times. But Mrs. Grayson had reassured them, said she was teaching the girl responsibility, teaching her life skills, making her useful instead of lazy. They had believed her. Or more accurately, they had wanted to believe her, because believing her meant they didn't have to get involved, didn't have to report, didn't have to be the ones who broke up a family or caused trouble. Marcus understood. He had done the same thing once. When he was 10 years old and saw another child being hurt, he had said nothing, done nothing, let his fear and uncertainty keep him silent. That child had disappeared. Marcus had never forgiven himself. The charges against Mrs. Grayson were serious: child endangerment, neglect, exploitation of a minor. She would likely face jail time, years, not months. But what struck Marcus most was the note at the end of Rachel's report. Despite 3 years of exploitation, Sophie Torres shows remarkable resilience and emotional intelligence. Her primary concern throughout all interviews was the welfare of her brothers and mother. Recommend extensive therapy for all children, but prognosis for recovery is good with proper support. Proper support. Marcus set down his phone, walked to his window. The city was still there, still glittering, still full of life he wasn't part of. But for the first time, he saw a path forward, a way to be part of something that mattered more than stock prices and merger agreements. Somewhere out there, in a hotel room he had provided, 4 children were finally safe. It should be enough. He had done his part, answered the call, brought in the authorities, arranged temporary shelter. His responsibility ended there. He could return to his normal life tomorrow, back to board meetings and profit margins, back to the comfortable numbness he had perfected over 2 decades. But Marcus knew he wouldn't, couldn't. Something fundamental had changed inside him. Some wall had cracked. Some door had opened. He wasn't done, not even close. At 8 in the morning, Marcus showed up at the hotel suite with bags of fresh pastries and coffee. Elena answered the door in yesterday's clothes. Her hair was damp from a shower. Surprise was evident on her face. "Marcus, I wasn't expecting you. I mean, you didn't have to come back. I wanted to check on everyone. Is this a bad time?" No, come in. The kids are eating breakfast. Hotel room service is apparently magical in their eyes. Marcus stepped inside. The suite was organized chaos, the kind that comes with 4 young children in the morning. The triplets sat at the dining table, working their way through plates of pancakes and fruit with the single-minded focus that only hungry children possess. Syrup was everywhere, on their faces, on their hands, probably in their hair. Sophie sat beside them. Her bandaged hands were carefully cutting up fruit into small pieces, making them bite-sized for her brothers. The action was so automatic she probably didn't even realize she was doing it. Still taking care of them, still being the parent. Marcus felt something tighten in his chest. "Good morning." He set down the bags of pastries. "I brought chocolate croissants and apple turnovers. I wasn't sure what everyone liked." 3 identical heads turned toward him. 3 identical faces lit up with interest. "I love chocolate," Ethan announced. "Me too," Mason echoed. "Me 3, Dylan finished. Sophie smiled, a genuine smile that transformed her small, serious face, made her look like the 7-year-old she was instead of the miniature adult she had been forced to become. "Thank you, Mr. Webb. That's really nice." "You're welcome, Sophie. How are your hands feeling this morning?" "Better. Dr. Morgan gave Mommy special cream to put on them. It doesn't hurt as much now." Marcus glanced at Elena. She was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Gratitude mixed with confusion. Appreciation mixed with wariness. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" He kept his voice low. In private. Elena nodded, led him to the small kitchenette. It gave them a semblance of privacy while keeping the children in view. A mother's instinct. Never let them out of sight. She poured coffee with practiced efficiency. Years of waitressing had made the motion automatic. Rachel Morgan called this morning. Elena's voice was tight, controlled, holding back emotion through sheer force of will. She wants Sophie to see a pediatric burn specialist today. All 4 kids should start with a child psychologist this week. She paused, set down the coffee pot with more force than necessary. She gave me a list of sliding scale clinics. Marcus heard what she wasn't saying, heard the frustration underneath the carefully neutral tone. But, he prompted, but even sliding scale clinics cost money I don't have. I already missed a shift yesterday. If I miss more work, I'll lose one or both of my jobs. And without Mrs. Grayson, I don't have anyone to watch the kids. Her voice was rising now, the control slipping. I'm stuck in an impossible situation. My daughter needs medical care. My kids need therapy, but I have to work to keep a roof over our heads, and I can't work because I have no one to watch them, and I can't afford childcare because I'm barely making rent as it is. She stopped, took a breath, fought back tears. I'm trapped, just like always. Marcus had been thinking about this exact problem all night, had made calls before coming to the hotel, had already set things in motion. What if you didn't have to work 2 jobs anymore? Elena looked at him sharply, her eyes narrowed, defensive walls going up. I'm not accepting a handout, Marcus. I appreciate everything you've done. I really do. But I've been taking care of my family on my own for 4 years. I'm not starting to be dependent on someone else's charity now. It's not charity. Marcus kept his voice calm, reasonable. It's a job offer. Elena stared at him. What? Meridian Industries needs someone to oversee our new community outreach program. It's a real position, real salary, benefits, reasonable hours. You'd be perfect for it. I don't have any experience in corporate outreach. Elena's voice was flat, practical, already rejecting the idea before she fully heard it. I'm a waitress and a cleaning lady. I don't have a college degree. I don't have references beyond my current employers who are going to be furious when I have to quit. You're a mother who has managed to keep 4 children fed, housed, and cared for on a shoestring budget while working 2 jobs. Marcus leaned forward, willing her to hear him, to believe him. You know how to stretch resources, prioritize needs, solve problems under pressure. That's exactly what community outreach requires. He paused, let a small smile touch his lips. Plus, you're not afraid to tell a billionaire CEO he's full of it. That's a surprisingly rare and valuable quality. Elena laughed. She couldn't help it. The sound was startled out of her. Genuine despite everything. The moment broke when Ethan's voice called from the dining room. Mommy! Mason spilled his juice. Elena was moving before Marcus could blink, instinct and practice taking over. She grabbed napkins, comforted Mason who had started crying, wiped up the mess with efficient motions, prevented Dylan and Ethan from trying to help in ways that would make things worse. She handled the small crisis without losing patience, without raising her voice, just efficiently solving the problem while making Mason feel better about his mistake. Marcus watched, saw exactly what he had described. Problem solving under pressure, calm in chaos, making people feel valued even in their failures. When Elena returned into the kitchenette, he was ready. See, that's exactly the kind of problem solving I need. Elena studied him for a long moment, really looked at him, trying to see past the expensive suit and the polished exterior, trying to understand why this stranger was helping them. Why are you really doing this? And please don't say it's just because Sophie called you. There's more to it than that. Marcus had known this question was coming, had prepared an answer. But now, facing Elena's direct gaze, he found himself telling the truth instead. My parents died when I was 12. Car accident. I went into the foster care system. He watched her expression shift. Surprise, then sympathy. Some homes were good, some were terrible, but I learned early that most people don't actually see struggling kids. They walk past them every day and just don't see them. He paused, let himself be vulnerable in a way he rarely allowed. Yesterday, Sophie called me and I almost didn't answer. I almost was one of those people who don't see. But I did answer, and it changed something in me. Made me realize that all the money and success in the world doesn't mean anything if I'm not using it to actually help people who need it. Lena's expression softened. I'm sorry about your parents. It was a long time ago, but it shaped who I became. Maybe it prepared me to understand, at least a little bit, what your kids are going through. The newspaper profile mentioned you were an eligible bachelor. Elena's voice was careful now. Testing. No family? No, I dated over the years, but nothing stuck. I threw myself into work. It was safer than risking real connection. He met her eyes. Until yesterday, when a 7-year-old girl reminded me what actually matters. 2 weeks passed in a blur. Elena started her position at Meridian Industries. The office was bright, modern, with windows that overlooked the Chicago River. Her colleagues were welcoming, professional, treated her like an equal instead of hired help. The work itself was challenging but meaningful, coordinating community programs, connecting struggling families with resources, building partnerships with local organizations. It felt important in a way her previous jobs never had, but the transition wasn't easy. Sophie's medical appointments revealed the full extent of the damage. Dr. Elizabeth Barnes was the pediatric burn specialist, late 50s, calm demeanor, the kind of doctor who had seen too much suffering but still chose compassion over cynicism. She examined Sophie's hands with gentle thoroughness, took x-rays, documented every scar, every healed burn, every injury that told the story of 3 years of exploitation. The good news, doctor, Barnes explained to Elena and Marcus in her office, is that most of these are superficial burns. Second degree at worst. There's no significant nerve damage, no loss of function. She pulled up images on her computer, showed them the healing progression. With proper care, moisturizing, and possibly some scar reduction treatments, when she's older, her hands will be fine. She'll have full use of them. Elena felt relief wash through her. And the bad news? Doctor. Barnes's expression became more serious. The bad news is that these scars will be visible, permanent reminders of what she went through. And at 7, almost 8, Sophie is at an age where she's starting to become aware of how others perceive her. Marcus saw it immediately. She's already hiding her hands. Elena nodded. At school, she keeps them in her pockets. When other kids ask what happened, she mumbles something about a cooking accident and changes the subject. That's not uncommon. Dr. Barnes was sympathetic but honest. Trauma victims often feel shame about their visible scars, like they're evidence of something they did wrong. We need to watch for signs of self-consciousness or anxiety about her appearance. She turned to Elena. I'm recommending therapy for all 4 children, someone who specializes in childhood trauma. Dr. Rachel Morgan took on that role. The social worker had training in child psychology, had worked with abuse victims for 20 years, knew how to help children process experiences that no child should have to process. The first session was just Sophie, alone with Rachel in a comfortable office filled with toys and art supplies. Safe spaces for children to express what words couldn't capture. Sophie drew pictures, disturbing images that made Elena cry when Rachel showed them to her later. Sophie at a stove, flames rising around her like monsters, her hands reaching toward fire, her brothers crying in the background. Mrs. Grayson as a shadowy figure, looming, threatening. In every picture, Sophie was alone, small, overwhelmed. She's processing, Rachel explained to Elena and Marcus during a follow-up meeting. Using art to express what she can't say out loud. It's actually a good sign, better than suppressing it. Will she be okay? Elena's voice was small, frightened. Yes. Rachel was confident. Sophie has significant trauma. PTSD, symptoms, nightmares. She's hypervigilant, protective of her brothers to an unhealthy degree. She flinches when anyone raises their voice. She paused, made sure Elena heard the next part. But she has something many trauma victims don't have. She has you, a mother who loves her, who's fighting for her, who's getting her help instead of ignoring the problem. Rachel looked at Marcus. And she has someone who answered when she called, who believed her, who acted. She closed the folder. The trial's going to be difficult, having to testify about what happened, facing Mrs. Grayson again. It could re-traumatize her, but I think with proper preparation and support, Sophie can handle it. The trial, Lena's voice was hollow. How long? The prosecutor, Sarah Mitchell, wants to move quickly. She's talking 8 weeks from now. 8 weeks. 2 months to prepare a 7-year-old to relive her trauma in front of strangers. Through all of it, Marcus was there. Not overbearing, not intrusive, but present. He attended medical appointments when Elena needed support, sat in waiting rooms while Sophie was examined, provided a calm presence when everything felt overwhelming. He picked up the triplets from their new daycare when Elena had late meetings, The boys loved him, talked about him constantly, asked when Uncle Marcus was coming over. He showed up on Saturday mornings with groceries, stayed to help with household chores, fixed the leaky faucet in Elena's bathroom, assembled the new bunk beds she had bought for the triplets. Slowly, carefully, he was becoming part of their lives. Elena noticed. How could she not? One evening, after he had spent 3 hours helping the triplets build an elaborate fort from couch cushions, she pulled him aside. You don't have to do this. Her voice was quiet but firm. You've already done so much. Given me a job. Helped us find a better apartment. Connected us with resources. Marcus had helped them move 2 weeks ago. The new place was bigger, safer, in a better neighborhood. Still modest, but worlds better than Maple Street. You don't owe us your free time too. Marcus looked at her, really looked at her, saw the wall she was trying to maintain, the distance she was trying to keep. Elena, I'm not here because I owe you anything. I'm here because I want to be here. He let the words hang between them. Because when I'm not here, I'm thinking about being here. Is that okay? Elena felt her heart skip. Over the past weeks, she had been trying to maintain emotional distance, to protect herself and her children from getting too attached, from depending on someone who might disappear when things got hard. Every man in her life had done exactly that. Her father, Sophie's father, even casual dates who vanished the moment they learned she had 4 kids. But Marcus kept showing up, kept being patient with the triplets' chaos, kept being gentle with Sophie's trauma, kept being respectful of Elena's boundaries. He genuinely seemed to enjoy the messy reality of their lives. It's okay, she heard herself say. More than okay. The words felt dangerous, like admitting something she wasn't ready to admit. The kids adore you. Sophie asks about you every day. The boys think you're some kind of superhero. And what do you think? The question was quiet, direct, unavoidable. Elena felt herself blush. She hadn't blushed in years. I think you're dangerous. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Dangerous? To my carefully constructed walls, to my determination to do this all on my own, to my belief that people like you don't actually exist in real life. People like me? Marcus's voice was gentle, curious, kind, patient, present, real. Elena shook her head, trying to make sense of it. Every man I've known has run at the first sign of difficulty. My father left when I was 10. Sophie's father disappeared when he found out I was pregnant with triplets. Even casual dates would vanish once they realized I had kids. She looked at him. But you showed up to help a stranger's child, and you're still here, building cushion forts and reading bedtime stories. It doesn't make sense. Marcus smiled, that rare, genuine smile that transformed his usually serious face. Maybe it doesn't have to make sense. Maybe some things just are. The moment was broken by a crash from the kitchen. 3 identical voices spoke in perfect unison. Uh-oh. Elena and Marcus rushed to the kitchen, found the triplets covered in flour, completely covered, white from head to toe. The bag they had somehow pulled from the pantry was now empty. Its contents decorated the kitchen floor like snow. Dylan looked up at them, flour in his hair, on his face, in his eyelashes. We making cookies? Ethan nodded seriously, also completely white. For Mr. Marcus. Mason, the only one who seemed remotely concerned about being in trouble, offered a small smile. Surprise? Elena corrected their pronunciation automatically, then caught Marcus's amused expression. Although calling me Mr. Marcus is pretty adorable. I answered to both. He knelt down to the boy's level. His expensive suit was going to get ruined. He didn't seem to care. Guys, we need to ask before we start cooking projects. Remember what we talked about? Kitchen safety? 3 blonde heads nodded solemnly. Safety first, Dylan recited. That's right. How about we clean this up together, and then tomorrow, if your mom says it's okay, we can actually bake cookies. The safe way. He paused, let the next words carry weight. With Sophie, every head turned. Sophie had been standing in the doorway, watching. Her expression was unreadable, careful. She hadn't been near a kitchen in 2 weeks, flinched whenever she heard the stove turn on, refused to eat at the dining table if she could see the kitchen. The trauma ran deep. With me? Her voice was small, uncertain. Only if you want to. Marcus was careful, gentle. No pressure, but I thought it might be nice. All of us together. Making something fun instead of something you had to make. Sophie looked at her bandaged hands. They were healing but still wrapped. Still visible reminders of 3 years of suffering. Can I think about it? Of course you can. You take all the time you need. That night, after the children were asleep, Elena found herself thinking about Marcus's question. With Sophie, it was brilliant, terrifying, but brilliant. Sophie needed to reclaim the kitchen, needed to create new memories that weren't soaked in fear and pain, needed to learn that cooking could be something other than survival. But was she ready? Elena wasn't sure. She also wasn't sure about her own feelings, about the way her heart had started beating faster when Marcus showed up, about the way she caught herself watching him with her children, about the way his presence had become something she looked forward to instead of something that made her anxious. It was too fast, too much, too risky. She had 4 kids to protect, couldn't afford to make mistakes, couldn't afford to trust the wrong person again. But Marcus wasn't the wrong person. That was becoming increasingly clear. He was kind when he didn't have to be, present when he could have walked away, patient with chaos that would have sent most men running. He looked at Sophie with respect instead of pity, played with the triplets like they were the most important people in the world, treated Elena like an equal instead of a charity case. It scared her how much she was starting to depend on him. The phone rang, late, after 10. Elena almost didn't answer, but caller ID showed Sarah Mitchell, the prosecutor. Mrs. Torres, I'm sorry to call so late, but we need to talk about the trial. Elena's stomach dropped. What about it? Mrs. Grayson's defense team is strong. David Hartman, he's good. Very good. He's already laying groundwork to claim Sophie volunteered, that she was an enthusiastic helper, that you were a negligent mother who should have known what was happening. That's not true, Elena's voice rose. I know, but juries don't always see truth clearly, especially when a skilled lawyer is muddying the water. Sarah paused. Let that sink in. I need Sophie to testify, her own words, her own story. It's the only way to counter Hartman's narrative. Absolutely not. Elena's response was immediate, fierce. My daughter has been through enough. I won't put her through the trauma of testifying. I understand your hesitation, but without Sophie's testimony, there's a real chance Mrs. Grayson walks or gets a slap on the wrist. Maybe a year. Then she's free to hurt other children. The words hung heavy in the air. Think about it. Talk to Sophie. Talk to Dr. Morgan. But Elena, we need her. Justice needs her. After Sarah hung up, Elena sat in the dark living room, staring at nothing, thinking about impossible choices. She couldn't ask Sophie to do this. Couldn't ask her 7-year-old daughter to stand in a courtroom and relive her trauma. To face the woman who had hurt her. To be cross-examined by a lawyer who would try to make her seem like a liar. It was too much. But if she didn't, Mrs. Grayson might go free, might hurt other children, other families. Elena didn't know what to do. The next morning, Marcus showed up as usual, took one look at Elena's face and knew something was wrong. What happened? She told him about Sarah's call, about the request for Sophie to testify, about the impossible choice she was facing. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. It has to be Sophie's choice. His voice was firm, certain. We can't make this decision for her. She needs to understand what it means, what it will cost, and then she needs to decide. She's 7 years old. She's 7 years old and she's already survived 3 years of exploitation. She's stronger than we give her credit for. He paused. But we support her either way. If she says no, we respect that. We find another way. If she says yes, we make sure she has everything she needs to get through it. Elena knew he was right, hated that he was right, but knew it nonetheless. That evening, they sat down with Sophie, all 3 of them, Marcus, Elena, and the little girl who had been forced to grow up too fast. They explained about the trial, about what it would mean, about how hard it would be, about the choice she had to make. Sophie listened. Her face was serious, processing. When they finished, she was quiet for a long time. Finally, she spoke. If I don't talk, will Mrs. Grayson hurt other kids? Elena's heart broke. Sweetheart, that's not your responsibility. But will she? Marcus answered honestly. Maybe. We don't know for sure, but there's a chance. Sophie looked at her hands, at the scars that were forming, at the physical evidence of her suffering. I'll do it. Her voice was small but determined. I'll tell people what happened. So other kids don't have to go through what I did. Elena pulled her daughter close, tears streaming down her face. You don't have to be brave for everyone else, baby. I know. Sophie's voice was muffled against her mother's shoulder. But I want to. Dr. Morgan says I'm stronger than I think. Maybe this is how I prove it. Marcus knelt beside them both. His voice was gentle. Sophie, if you do this, I promise I'll be there, in the courtroom. You can look at me whenever you get scared. And I won't look away. I'll be right there, okay? Sophie looked at him, trust shining in her eyes. Okay, Uncle Marcus. The title hit Marcus like a physical blow. Uncle Marcus. Not Mr. Webb. Not just Marcus. Uncle. Family. 8 weeks. They had 8 weeks to prepare Sophie for the hardest thing she would ever have to do. 8 weeks to help her heal enough to face her abuser. 8 weeks for this fragile new family to become strong enough to weather what was coming. Marcus looked at Elena, at Sophie, at the triplets playing in the next room. He had answered a phone call 8 weeks ago, had walked into an apartment and found children suffering, had made a choice to get involved when he could have walked away. That choice had changed everything. The hollow in his chest was gone, filled with something he had never expected to find. Purpose, connection, family. Not his family, not yet, maybe not ever. But a family he would protect with everything he had. The trial was coming. Justice was coming. And Marcus Webb was ready.